Good afternoon, Rotary family. A gentle reminder that we're starting 5 minutes early today. I'd like to officially welcome you to the 5,404th meeting of our wonderful club. Nice to see you all today. Now with that, it's my pleasure to welcome Sarah Janigan, who I'd also like to publicly thank because she recommended to me at our last board meeting that I announce and show pictures of what the committees are doing to build that enthusiasm, because of course, that's where we get the camaraderie and the sense of belongingness that keeps us coming back. So Sarah, thank you for that, and take it away.
Well, I am very happy, along with Rod Deardan, to be introducing our speaker today. Ken and I go way back. We met as students at San Jose State University, go Spartans, living in the same dorm, Joe West Hall, which is still surviving and not torn down yet. We later started our professional careers, and for Ken, his political career, as colleagues in County Supervisor Suzanne Wilson's office, where Rod was representing District 4 and was right down the hall from us. We shared an office cubicle on the 10th floor, and I got to see firsthand the beginnings of Ken's political future. Ken was always smart and organized, and after graduating from San Jose State, he went on to earn a master's and a PhD in education from Stanford. He was the county's first openly gay elected official when he won a seat on the San Jose Evergreen Community College Board in 1992. He went on to represent District 6 on the San Jose City Council and then served for 12 years on the Santa Clara County Board of Supervisors, representing District 4, the seat that Rod Deardan once held and that Susan Ellenberg now holds. Since leaving the Board of Supervisors, Ken has been a lecturer at San Jose State in American politics. And while many of us were trying out new sourdough recipes or working on jigsaw puzzles during the lockdown, Ken was organizing a website documenting the 50-year history of the LGBTQ struggle for civil rights in Silicon Valley, producing a documentary, and planning a year-long exhibit at History San Jose. And he's just put out his latest book, Run, My Story of the LGBTQ plus Political Power, Equity, and Acceptance in Silicon Valley, which he will have afterwards in the back of the room. Please join me in welcoming my friend and former county supervisor, the Honorable Ken Yeager.
Well, good afternoon. It's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me. And thank you for that kind introduction, Sarah. I promise not to reveal any of the going-ons that went on in that dorm room for those several years. But also thank you, Rotary, for all the great work you do in the community. It is much appreciated, and I know you all put a lot of time and energy into your activities. As people may know, the timing of my talk revolves around the fact that San Jose celebrates its annual Pride Parade and Festival the last weekend in August, this Saturday and Sunday. Many may wonder why this particular weekend, given that Pride is celebrated the last weekend of June with big parades in San Francisco and New York to commemorate the anniversary of the Stonewall riots in New York City in 1969. Historically, San Jose had its Pride celebration the same weekend, but organizers constantly struggled to raise funds because so many of the companies that supported Pride were satisfied with just being sponsors of San Francisco Pride. So as a way to increase revenue and attendance, San Jose Pride chose to move our Pride celebration to this weekend. San Jose, Silicon Valley has a unique LGBTQ story to tell, separate from San Francisco's. Our history illustrates how queer people in a large suburban city, not an urban one, went about bringing dramatic social change. The lessons learned and the strategies we used may serve as a guide for activists elsewhere when organizing to counter the current uptick of anti-gay and anti-trans hostilities in their communities. I'm sure you've been reading about the current assault on LGBTQ and trans people throughout the country, with laws being passed with no regard for the medical or mental health effects on a vulnerable population, particularly pre-teens. I have to say, what's going on now takes me back in time. If you were living here in 1980, some of this will sound familiar. Back in the mid-1970s, non-discrimination protections for LGBTQ people at the state or national level were impossible to win. So attention turned to cities. By far the most well-known city was Miami in 1977. This led to an unexpected backlash as the issue morphed from being centered on civil rights to whether the ordinance, the non-discrimination ordinance, would legitimize a lifestyle perceived as perverse and dangerous. The campaign would give rise to people like Anita Bryant and Jerry Falwell with their Save the Children campaign, Save the Children from the Gays. Signatures were gathered to place a referendum on the ballot, and unfortunately, Miami voted 2-1 to repeal the non-discrimination law. Religious conservatives found a gold mine, similar to what is happening today. They went to all of the cities across the country that had such non-discrimination ordinances, being able to overturn all of them except for one. This nationwide movement arrived in San Jose and Santa Clara County in 1979, when, after 6 hearings and 25 hours of testimony, mainly from fundamentalist Christians who opposed it, the Board of Supervisors voted 4-1 to pass a gay non-discrimination ordinance. With less fanfare, the San Jose City Council took a similar vote. Opponents quickly gathered twice the signatures they needed to put the 2 referendums on the 1980 June ballot, measures A and B. The opponents of the ordinances emphasized the stereotype of gay men as sexual deviants and child molesters who could not have children of their own, so they had to recruit. It was a terrible time. The campaign against the measures became a rallying cry for the fundamentalists. One of the supervisors who voted on the measure was Rod Diradan. In a 2018 interview, he recalled leaving his church with his wife and children and finding that every car in the parking lot had a flyer on the windshield condemning his vote and saying that Diradan was a false person and that actually Diradan was gay. He subsequently learned that the flyer was distributed to every car in all the church parking lots in his district. Supporters of the ordinance never had a chance. It was a bloodbath. By a margin of 3-1, 70% to 30%, both measures went down in flames. You can imagine what that message sent to politicians when 70% of the people are on one side of the issue. I tell this story to let you know that contrary to popular belief, Santa Clara County has not always been a bastion of progressive politics, particularly for the LGBTQ residents. Let me give you a couple examples of how bad things get politically when you lose 70 to 30. In 1984, Wigsy Severson and I co-founded the LGBTQ group called the Bay Area Municipal Elections Committee, or BAMEC. When we started our endorsement process, we worried few candidates would want to be associated with us. One Republican assemblyman and later congressman for one term responded that he meant no disrespect when he told us frankly, "I will not be seeking the endorsement of your group." One Democratic assembly member we endorsed and made a contribution to sent the check back, writing that he was not in a position to accept our contribution at this time. The defeats of measures A and B even affected strong civil rights allies like then Congress members Norma Mineta and Leon Panetta. Mineta had been a prior co-sponsor of the National Gay and Lesbian Civil Rights Act, but withdrew his support after the overwhelming defeat of the 2 measures. It was no small matter that his district included the Almaden Valley, which many people referred to as the Bible Belt of Santa Clara County. Also, Congressman Leon Panetta would not become a co-signer of the national bill for many years afterwards. BAMEC worked with both of them until they did finally become co-signers. One more example, in 1986, when BAMEC had its first dinner to celebrate the defeat of a statewide AIDS quarantine initiative, only one elected official from San Jose attended, San Jose Councilwoman Iola Williams. This anti-gay environment had a personal effect on me. So prevalent were all the anti-gay attitudes in 1984 that a San Jose assemblyman with the rhyming name of Alistair McAllister was very comfortable writing an op-ed in the Mercury News pleading that Governor George Deukmejian to veto a law that had been passed by the legislature to make it illegal to discriminate based on sexual orientation. He said for the governor to sign the bill would give the, quote, wrongful practice, unquote, of homosexuality legal, social, and political legitimacy. The statement stunned me when I read it on a Friday morning in March. I was angry that an elected official thought I had forfeited all of my civil rights simply because I was gay. Putting the paper down, I said to myself, Ken, if you don't fight for your rights to be a part of this community, then no one else will. I realized that if I was to have equality in San Jose, I would have to fight for it. I decided to challenge the assemblyman by using his weapon of choice, an op-ed in the Mercury News. And I see my good friends from the Mercury News here. There was just one minor hiccup. I wasn't completely out. My byline in the Mercury News meant that I would come out to the newspaper's entire Bay Area readership. I knew that the publicity might cause me problems. I wondered if my political friends would distance themselves from me because I was too out, or if I would ever be hired to manage another political campaign. I worked for Congressman Don Edwards at the time and worried he may not be particularly thrilled to have an openly gay staffer, but he didn't hesitate in telling me to go ahead and submit it, which I did. Throughout the 1980s and the 90s, BAMEC met with elected officials for one-on-one discussions and to answer questions they had about our issues. This was still a time when people did not know many gay people and often had preconceived notions that were false. These meetings proved enormously effective, particularly with Republican representatives. We used to have those. I would advise people advocating for trans rights in hostile states to take similar action, particularly with more persuadable politicians. Organizing the LGBTQ community was key. As BAMEC's membership grew, so did our political clout, with the BAMEC dinner growing larger in attendance each year. By the 1990s, it was the political dinner to go to, with over 500 people attending, including 100 elected officials and candidates. What a remarkable turnaround. But progress was being made in other areas as well. Since non-discrimination ordinances still could not be passed at the local, state, or national level, attention turned to corporate America. For a number of reasons, many gays and lesbians were attracted to careers in high-tech companies that were located in the Bay Area. Employees of these companies started gay employee groups, either recognized or not by management. One network that formed was called High Tech Gays. Their members began to demand certain rights, such as domestic partner benefits and non-discrimination policies. Each time a new company granted these, other companies followed in order to retain and attract employees. Societal norms were changing as well. Historically, LGBTQ people were looked upon with great disapproval, certainly by the church, the law, and society at large. It was so mandatory to be closeted that many people did not think they knew any LGBTQ people. That began to change as the AIDS epidemic took hold in the 80s and the 90s, and people learned for the first time that they had a gay son, a gay brother, a gay uncle who was dying. Also, more LGBTQ people were heeding Supervisor Harvey Milk's call to come out of the closet. When they did, their partners were introduced to their families, and as same-sex relationships began to become accepted, support for marriage equality grew. And things changed for me too, which I discuss in my book. And Sarah touched a little bit on this, but up until 1992, no LGBTQ person had ever been elected to any office in Santa Clara County at any level. In fact, only a handful had been elected in the entire country. This changed locally when I won a seat on the San Jose Evergreen Community College Board, followed with the win on the San Jose City Council, and followed then by the Board of Supervisors in 2006 until I was termed out at the end of 2018. One hurdle that any minority candidate has to overcome is the belief that they will only focus on issues related to their constituency and not the whole community. This is especially true when they are the first, and voters don't have anything to compare them to. Part of the negative campaigns that were always used against me was that I was better suited to run in San Francisco because I would only focus on gay issues, because that must be what gay politicians do, which of course is total nonsense. Try slowing down traffic in neighborhoods, expanding the trail network, or getting toys out of kids' Happy Meals. Now those are what take up so much time. Having said that, I am tremendously proud of my accomplishments for the LGBTQ community. I was the first to raise the rainbow flag at San Jose City Hall, and I know that Council Members Cohen and Foley I was able to join you yesterday when we were doing that again. And also the first at the Government Center at Santa Clara County in 2007. First to have the San Jose City Council approve a Pride Proclamation in 2001 and created the nation's first County Office of LGBTQ Affairs. But just when you think things are getting better, they get worse again. Where to begin? Well, we can start with comments by Supreme Court Justice Clara Thomas, writing in the Dobbs case that the court should reconsider protecting same-sex relationships and marriage equality. And you know that Samuel Alito is right behind him, along with other Supreme Court justices. I think we might be, unfortunately, have to say goodbye to federal rights to getting married in all states. To ward off any potential effect in California, there will be a measure on next year's ballot to repeal language in the state constitution that only recognizes marriage between a man and a woman. That provision was overturned by the US Supreme Court in 2013, but if the court reverses itself, the old language may still apply. Then there are the two Supreme Court decisions that all but void LGBTQ non-discrimination policies when religious freedoms are voiced. Those 6-3 decisions suggest that the rights of LGBTQ people are on a vulnerable legal footing, particularly when they are at odds with claims of religious freedom. The queer community is braced for the slow but steady removal of protections across the country when legal challenges are filed. 2023 has been the worst year on record for anti-LGBTQ laws. According to the Human Rights Commission, there have been over 700 such bills introduced in 41 states, with over 75 signed into law. In Florida, the state that became known for its Don't Say Gay law, Governor DeSantis recently signed a new bill that prohibits any instruction about sexual orientation or gender identity all the way through 12th grade, and other states are following. Of course, this is at a time when suicide rates and mental health issues are increasing for queer youth, and I just wonder what message these states are giving them. As Charles Blow wrote in the New York Times, politicians like DeSantis and many others have Willie Hortonized transgender equality, the gender equality movement, and by extension, the whole movement of LGBTQ equality. The movement for marriage equality was successful because people got to know LGBTQ plus people, destroying long-held negative stereotypes. But a 2021 survey found that only 1 in 5 Americans knew someone who was trans, although that number seems high to me. In the last couple of years, I have learned much more about my trans brothers and sisters than ever before. Perhaps the same is true for many of you. Where once we thought we didn't know any trans people, all of a sudden we realize that they are all around us. Unfortunately, where there is ignorance about trans people, hysteria and cruelty often take hold just for political gain. I should mention that our county government embraces our trans youth and adults. In addition to operating a medical care gender clinic, it will soon open a mental health gender clinic as well. As to other battlefronts, don't get me started. We can talk about the craziness outlawing drag queen shows. Really, for decades, drag shows of one sort or another have been happening in bars across the country, and somehow society did not come to a screaming halt. So why the threat now? Is this really the biggest issue facing red states, more than healthcare, the environment, mental health, and drug overdoses? I should say I'm proud that Books Inc. in Campbell is not intimidated by any potential protests and is holding another drag queen story hour in their store on August 31st. And the fact that my book is being sold there, anyway, one parting comment. One-on-one relationships are important. So whenever you have the opportunity to give a hug of support to an LGBTQ friend or family member, especially if trans, non-binary, or gender fluid, please do so. Remember, they assume that you will be judgmental and disapproving. Telling them otherwise will mean the world to them and open up a dialogue that will be valued by you both. Thank you and happy Pride.
That's an awesome response.
No, that's pretty cool.
I'm not ready for questions. That was an incredible presentation. At times I was horrified, but I was left hopeful. So thank you for your words. That was really moving. Questions? Yes, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Ken, for that moving talk to us. I just want to say for the record, you were an incredible council member for District 6. You spent a lot of time on getting us traffic calming, permit parking, because we had to have a number of things you did for us, and we thank you, and you were at every event we had. But I do want to say something that stands out to me, and it's this is a comment, I hope you'll be okay with that. In June of 2001, my youngest brother, Christopher Flowers, was suffering from AIDS, and he had been hospitalized in the months before that. I think you invited us to come to City Hall for the raising of the rainbow flag for the first time ever. And my brother sat next to me, very ill, very weak, and said, I thought I'd never live to see this.
Wow.
He lived 6 more years. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth.
We have time for 2 more questions. Deanna.
Thank you so much for that very inspiring speech. I've been raised in more conservative areas in the United States, and when I was in college, the kindest men took me in when I was interning at the Department of Education. And I've grown up with persons who could be considered conservative who are also gay. And during these times, I worry about them because I know that there is a really large voice and cohort of the most amazing, compassionate, conservative individuals who also happen to be LGBTQ. How do we support them and bring our nation to a more kind and compassionate dialogue?
That's a big one.
Yeah, and I think it's just a matter of people sort of stepping a little bit out of their comfort zone, as some of your conservative friends must have to deal with their immediate environment around them. I think you sort of handle it as you do with any sort of personal issue that's important to you. You start out by finding those that are going to be the most receptive and sort of having one-on-one conversations so that you're trying to change the outlook of the entire group that you interact with. But I think it's even now particularly important that conservative LGBTQ people speak out, because so much of the conservative movement is about sort of, being very negative towards gay people. And I think that just has to be addressed one-on-one.
James.
Ken, I'd like to ask you about your comments about the referendum to repeal Prop 8, I assume, when you're talking about the Constitution, to remove the part of the state constitution that says same-sex marriages are illegal. I think there's a lot of concern among people I talk to that this is going to bring this hot issue. I mean, we all hope that will pass, of course, but I think there's going to be some unpleasant politics next year. What do you think the community and the people who are supporting this referendum should be doing to make this a success next year?
Yeah, first off, I haven't seen any polls to know the favorability of gay marriage now. I mean, through forever, there was never 50%, and then you sort of finally got to around 52%. So you sort of hope as people know so many people who've gotten married. I mean, I've married over 100 people. It's just been wonderful. For some reason, county supervisors get to marry people. I don't know how that got put into the law, but I just got to believe that they wouldn't want to sort of deprive people of that right, or the people who still wanted to get married. But like with anything, it's just talking to people. So this goes back to that, as you had said, the language that was there because of Prop 8. That's what stopped the gay marriages for the 6-month window that they were allowed, and that then were overturned by the Supreme Court. So that language is still in the Constitution, and the fear is, again, if the Supreme Court just takes it away altogether, what happens to that language? But I know that they're going around collecting signatures now, and that this will be on November of 24.
Hi, Ken. I have one thing
One last quick question. Go ahead, Maggie.
It's
I'm
not
sorry,
a question, but I'm proud that Rotary has an LGBTQ club, and it's the Rotary Rainbow Club, Cheryl Lander, and they would love to have you as a speaker sometime, I'm sure.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
I apologize, Fernando, that we didn't get to your questions, but he's willing to stay a few minutes afterwards if anybody would like to speak further on this topic. Outstanding presentation. Thank you so much for your leadership.